Yesterday, just as I was leaving the air, you heard on WHO Live Trump administration officials announcing their new revised travel ban. And we have been joined multiple times on this topic by a constitutional expert named Byron Henry, who I just so much appreciate his take on things. He is, again, on the Griptide Foundation Repair Newsmaker line. Byron, good morning. Welcome back to WHO in Des Moines. How are you?
Great to be with you. I'm coming to you from sunny Mexico right now. On vacation.
I wondered why we lost you for a moment. Thank you for taking time during your vacation to talk about this. It looks to me like the Trump administration did take a look at the court ruling and did try to draft a ban that addressed those concerns. Was that your take on it?
Well, yes, I think that from the outset there was at least one area of ambiguity in the original executive order or travel ban, which dealt with you couldn't tell whether it actually banned lawful permanent residents or green card holders from coming back into the United States while they were traveling. So the first thing this new executive order does is basically exempts all temporary and lawful permanent residents, and it also excludes all those people that already have visas issued by the State Department, meaning if you have a visa in your hand that's good to come here for work or for vacation or for going to school or whatnot, they're excluded from this new travel ban. So those are the first issues. So that was the biggest issue with the original order. And once you carve those groups out, all you have left are those seeking asylum, refugee status, or those who just are seeking a visa, meaning they want to come to the United States. And of course, that's the discretion of Congress and the president as to whether or not to grant those visas. They have almost plenary discretion on denying the visas if they don't already have a visa. So this new order should go a long way in curing any ills that the court believed it had.
Well, and that's something that you've been very clear on, Byron, that I've appreciated, which you said, the overall context of this order is that the president does have broad powers to act in this area. So I would assume that any further court challenge, and there were folks making noises again yesterday about court challenge, would start to have difficulty in challenging this because there seems to have been such broad powers granted to the president in this area. What's your take on that?
Well, there's two problems, I think. First of all, the initial court decision was not a final court decision. It was a temporary decision based on a different standard of proof, and the court just ruled at this stage we're going to leave the executive order blocked until we can get to the merits. So there was never a final decision on the efficacy or the constitutionality of the first travel ban. But more importantly, I think the important takeaway here is that the due process finding that the original Ninth Circuit decision had was based on groups that may have statutory or constitutional rights. I'm not aware of any legal authority that those in other countries that are not here that are simply seeking refugee status or seeking a visa have any statutory or constitutional rights to assert here. So that's number one. But the second problem, and I think the even bigger problem, is if you remember that the states of Washington and Minnesota had standing to sue because they had students and professors that had visas in their hands with a right to come to this country and work or teach. So assuming that is good enough for standing, the court thought it was, and we never will get the answer to that at this point, but because that case is now probably going to be over. But you have to find a plaintiff who's here or someone here that has a strong enough interest in bringing someone from another country that has no right to be here. So that is going to be a very, very tall order indeed, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But and a lot of folks, Byron, too, are also making the case based on that economic development problems, that this was injuring their states economically. And again, it would seem to me that what you had in the first case, you're going to have difficulty arguing now in a later case.
Well, certainly. First, you'd have to argue that if it hurts your case economically, then the whole visa system hurts your state economically, because the visa system is very limited and it's discretionary. So then you have to prove that it is individuals from these 6 countries that are hurting your economy specifically, and then you're also going to have to prove that it's going to hurt your economy because this is a 90-day temporary travel ban. It might take more than 90 days to get a visa through the system without the travel ban. So they would have to show that the travel ban is causing people not to get here, even though the visa process itself could take more than 90 days. So with all those factors, I believe it's going to be very difficult to challenge the new travel ban on those grounds.
So do you think, Byron, as a person that studies the Constitution and practices in this area of law, is there anything that's going to come out of this ongoing court fight that may alter the president or Congress's power in the future? It seems to me like the power of the president and the Congress to have authority in this area has not really been challenged. That they still have broad discretion over immigration policy and who enters the country and who doesn't. Is there any long-term effect over this initial fight that we had over the Trump travel ban that you saw?
Well, nothing that's come out so far of any precedent, so to speak, has altered congressional authority or the Congress's ability to delegate that authority to the executive branch, number one. But number two, the Constitution is where the discretion comes from. And last I checked, no one has amended the Constitution since President Trump became president.
Right.
And therefore, Congress's authority over immigration is at its zenith. And when you couple national security with immigration, the courts have said that is where Congress and the executive powers are at their height, and the judiciary's role in oversight in that area is at its lowest. So basically, unless there's some groundbreaking case that all of a sudden inserts the judiciary as the third branch that's going to oversee immigration and national security, I suspect that the presidency and Congress's authority will come through this unscathed.
Well, and Byron, one of my favorite answers you've given me when we've talked about this in the past, I said, well, what argument could his opponents make? And you said, they'd probably come up with something. And so we've got a report that the New York Attorney General wants to go to court again against this travel ban. And he's going to argue that the ban has the intent to discriminate against Muslims. So it looks like the case he will still try to make is we're picking out a religious group and attempting to discriminate against them. But you're making an interesting argument here, which is you're trying to give constitutional rights to people that are not residents of this country. Is that the ultimate weakness in what the New York Attorney General is saying?
Well, that's the first of many weaknesses in that argument. Plus, that's old news. Basically, that argument would require you to find that any action taken against a predominantly Muslim country is a de facto or some kind of thinly veiled attempt to attack the majority religion of that country.
Right.
And for the courts to probe behind a president's action in the Middle East, where most of the countries are predominantly Muslim, by the way, we take actions all the time with respect to national security and immigration that deal with those countries. And I just can't imagine that the federal courts of this country are going to get involved in determining whether or not the president needs to and is required to take action. Remember, these 6 countries now, because Iraq's not on the new list, they were part of 7 countries, were designated countries with specific concerns to exporting terrorism by the George W. Bush administration and President Obama's administration. So it's not like President Trump pulled these countries out of a hat and said, let's pick on these countries because they have a Muslim population. These are countries that have been on a list for a decade.
That's Constitution expert Byron Henry. Byron, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Enjoy some sun and some warmth, and we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure.
We will be back with a story that I find absolutely fascinating that involves baby boomers. They are starting businesses late in life, so we're calling them boomers who are late bloomers. A financial expert will join me next. Jeff in for Jan, News Radio 1040 WHO.